Welcome back. We're going to continue the lecture on motor development. I'm going to jump right back into large motor development and then conclude the lecture with an overview of fine motor development. Let's begin with an example of a planning question around movement as the context for learning. The question is, will the boxes and low surfaces invite crawlers to pull to standing? Will the toys placed atop the boxes attract crawlers to reach up and pull up? Will the toddlers use the boxes to climb into, onto, and through? You can see in the pictures from the observation that the child has pulled himself to a standing position and is reaching for the toy. If this were your planning question and observation, what would be your next step? Following are some pictures from the Pickler Institute in Budapest, Hungary that illustrate beautifully creative furnishings that invite infants and toddlers to take on increasingly more challenging patterns of movement. While looking at these pictures, think about all the different ways that motor development is supported and challenged. Think about how different age groups could explore these furnishings. Hopefully these examples give you motivation to think about play spaces and motor development in a new light. I hope you will consider how furnishings can support motor development, challenge motor development, and also sometimes hinder development. Remember that perceptual development and motor development go hand in hand. In addition, development in every domain is related to perceptual and motor development. Although this developmental category may seem to happen independently, it is closely intertwined with cognition, language, and social-emotional development. These are all things to be considered when planning and interpreting in order to support development. Moving on to fine motor development, we will cover prehension, the stages of that sequence, and toys and materials to support development. Prehension is the ability to reach out and grasp using the fingers. This process takes several months and can begin as early as 5 to 9 days old, when an infant reaches towards an object with their arms extended and hand open. Goal-directed reaching, however, doesn't emerge until around 4 months, when infants reach out to an object and make contact in a batting movement with their whole hand. Next is the palmar grasp. This is when an infant reaches and grasps an object with their whole hand. The object is grasped in between the palm and fingers without the use of the thumb. Then comes the partial pincer. At this time, the thumb is involved. The fingers are sometimes used all together, but infants are now able to separate them and are able to grasp objects using several fingers together in opposition to the thumb. Lastly, the pincer, or neat pincer, is holding an object between the index finger and the thumb. The first milestone of prehension occurs between 4 to 8 months, with an average age of 5.6 months. Again, this is when the infant reaches out and bats at an object. This is an attempt to grasp objects with arm and whole hand. Some features to look for when considering toys and materials that support fine motor development at this stage are a resilient surface, meaning materials that are graspable, supple rather than rigid, have handles, such as safe protrusions to grab and hold on to, lightweight so the infant can lift and also for safety, things that can be held in one hand and are easy to see when on their back. This is because the line of sight is a 45-degree angle. So when something that has height rather than flat on the ground is available, it can be more easily seen by the infant. Also, something to avoid are objects that can roll away or are round and can't be grasped. Looking at these materials with respect to the features just covered, do they have a resilient surface? Are they graspable? Will they roll away? Do they have handles? Are they lightweight? Can they be held in one hand? Do they have height so they can be seen by an infant that is on their back? Thinking about a baby that is just beginning to figure out how to grasp an object, which of these toys is a better choice? Why? The palmar grasp occurs between the ages of 5 to 9 months with an average age of 6.8 months. Again, this is when an infant reaches and grasps an object with their whole hand, fingers together like a mitten. The object is grasped in between the palm and the fingers without the use of the thumb. This is not to be confused with the palmar reflex, which is seen at birth when newborns reflexively wrap fingers around anything in the palm. For babies who are figuring out the palmar grasp, what features make these toys inviting? Why? The partial pincer occurs between 6 to 10 months with an average age of 7.4 months. This is when the fingers work together in opposition to the thumb. Fingers can be joined together like a mitten, but are also beginning to work independently, and so the grasp can also be several fingers together in opposition of the thumb. An additional feature to look for at this stage is edges that are easy to grasp. Things such as baskets, boxes, and lids. Lightweight, again, is an important feature because infants are lifting, banging, waving, and dropping. For babies who are figuring out the partial pincer, what features make these toys inviting? Finally, the neat pincer, when infants are beginning to hold an object between the index finger and thumb. The neat pincer occurs between 7 to 12 months with an average age of 8.9 months. Now the infant is pinching, poking, and interested in small openings and crevices. Additional features to look for at this stage are lips, edges, and holes for poking with the index finger. For babies who are mastering the neat pincer, what features make these toys inviting? Once infants are able to reach, grasp, and manipulate objects, there's more of a concern for safety, especially since the first place the objects tend to go is straight to their mouth. Once the neat pincer is obtained, infants can find and pick up even the tiniest of objects. When selecting toys and materials for infants under 2, it's important to ensure that they are large enough so there's no chance for choking. Choking tubes can be purchased to test toys and materials to make sure they aren't too small, but a toilet paper roll can be used in a pinch. No pun intended. Anything that can fit into the toilet paper roll along any dimension needs to be avoided. Thinking about infants 0 to 12 months, what features would you look for to support the emerging grasp? Starting with the first stage when infants are attempting to reach and grasp, and moving to the later stages when babies move from palmar to partial pincer to neat pincer. It can be a lot of fun to look for and find everyday objects and materials that have the appropriate features and can be used to support the fine motor development. To end with, here's an example of a plan for possibilities looking at prehension as a context for learning. The planning question is, what will the infants do when they discover in the play space a collection of new objects, all of which have edges, ridges, and holes? You can see that the materials include an ice tray, lids, baskets, containers, and foam blocks. Looking at the picture and the observation, which stage of prehension do you think this infant is at? What toy features do you recognize as supportive and appropriate for this stage?